Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Female knife possession offences rising steeply from the BBC News 2 hours ago. Knife possession offences involving women in England have increased steeply since 2014, rising by at least 10% every year, police figures show. And this is predominantly done in London, as you can expect. And yes, of course, you could bring in the 650 statistic here if you wish. 6% of the population, 50% of the violent crime. It is true in America, and it is pretty much true in the UK as well, being in London being 13.3% black. However, of course, this is basically just going into culture. I would like to separate ethnicity and culture, and when you have, sorry, ethnicity and race, and when you have a kind of culture of fatherless homes, no strong male role model, and encouragement into gangs and deprived neighborhoods, then this sort of crime does happen. And then also when you have a decreased amount of police presence and decreased amount of self-protection available, then of course you're going to get people trying to defend themselves as well as trying to get money. Therefore, they're committing the crime, and then they need to defend themselves from the people who are committing the crime. And it is the vulnerable people who are affected the most, as they do then go on to say at the end of this article, where they say that I don't think it's any more nuanced than it is for men. It's about vulnerable young people getting drawn into the fringes of organised crime. And this is from the South Yorkshire Police, the force's Assistant Chief Constable Tim Forber, who said, while knife crime is still predominantly a male problem, it is increasingly about vulnerability rather than gender. It's a very small proportion of women, but it's a worrying proportion. We don't want to see any young people, any women, carrying knives in society. So the main story is that they predominantly carry them for their male counterparts because they know they're going to be stopped by the police less likely. It says the Home Office set a fund schemes to help gang-affected women and girls. Yes, let's hope it just helps people. Doesn't matter about gender, considering how they're saying that they know that women are going to be stopped and searched less often than men, and therefore they are carrying it for their male counterparts for gangs. So they say it comes against the backdrop of rising knife crime nationally, and after the number of fatal stabbings in England and Wales last year, the highest number since records began. Yes, it is done predominantly in London, if you wish. And yes, the photos that they have here do show race, of course. This one doesn't. We also have a gun here. How interesting. I thought guns were illegal. Who would have guessed that you can actually get illegal items? While London's Metropolitan Police saw the highest number of possession cases involving women, parts of Northern England have seen female knife possession crimes increase at a faster rate. Yeah, it seems to be twinned with immigration. You could say it's racist sentiment from the places that already exist, but when these regions become minority white, I don't think that really follows. You could say that when you have a high trust society like England, where you're supposed to show your face, you don't carry weapons, you trust the police, and also you trust your democratic system will be abided by, when people come in from different cultures who don't trust the police, they don't trust the government, they think people are tyrants, they think corruption is normal, they think hiding their face is also normal, then you get this kind of distrust and conflict within society, and this is where these crimes arise from. So they say London's Metropolitan Police recorded a 52% increase over 5 years, with a total of 916 record offences from 2014 to 2018. During the same time, Merseyside Police, oh dear, saw a 54% rise to 499 offences, while the number of offences in Greater Manchester doubled, with 95 recorded offences last year, hitting close to home now. In South Yorkshire, there was an 82% rise over 5 years, with 248 offences involving women. And you can just look up the demographics of this area if you wish to know how that's affected. So Metropolitan Police, of course, the main one, and then you've got Merseyside, Liverpool, Greater Manchester, and so on. So we have an example of a white woman here saying Theresa John regularly carried a knife for 12 years. She said it became part of my identity on the streets of Essex. Even used to name her knives. They say that her life spiraled out of control. In her early 20s, she became addicted to heroin and crack cocaine and worked as a prostitute to fund her addiction. And say she'd either have a knife or a pair of scissors because when she was out working on the streets, there'd be different guys who would force her to do stuff. And so self-protection because, of course, the police can't help. And when somebody is involved in illegal jobs, like prostitution in the UK, then, of course, she can't even go to police. Otherwise, she might then be in prison for being a prostitute. It's similar, of course, with the grooming gangs and the group gang raids happening further north, Rotherham in particular, where the lady who was busted about over 100 times was thought of by the police as a prostitute instead of as a victim. So this lady who seems to have reformed, after 2012, she stabbed her next door neighbor and was sentenced to 10 months in prison for actual bodily harm and possession of a knife. She says, it was like this mist came over me and I charged at her with a knife and just stabbed her straight in the top of the head for 10 months in prison. If you want to say that prison is a deterrent, then maybe men and women should get the same time for the same crime, seeing as they don't at the moment. But then again, if you want, then black people get served even more time for the same crime. So maybe it doesn't work so well as a deterrent. It would be nice if we could just put the law over equally. However, when you mention these things, you do also need to take into consideration things like if it's a repeat offence, if it's high recidivism, that kind of thing. Because of course you could say, oh well, this demographic, whichever one you pick, gets longer sentence for the same crime. However, they are not taking into effect the fact that they're not taking into account the fact that these people have already been imprisoned for different crimes and different offences. So she says in this group, for some women, it's a normal thing to have in your bag, like lipstick. She was a former gang leader from Peckham in South London who now works as a community support worker and independent gangs consultant. We've got girls that stab, but it's just like the elephant in the room. No one wants to talk about it because no one knows how to deal with it. Everywhere you go, you have problems with girls and their identity, their self-worth, and those are the vulnerable ones the boys end up picking up. She says some girls and women from broken homes see street gangs as their family and will do anything to fit in. Knife, guns, drugs, they are the couriers for it. They're not going to get stopped by police, and the men know that. Exactly, so they are the drug mules, essentially. So the Home Office said it was investing £220 million into steering both young men and young women away from violent crime. Well done. For female offenders specifically, it supports and funds young people's advocates who work with gang-affected youth, young women and girls in London, Manchester and the West Midlands. Find the Labour cancels. Spokesman added, we recently announced plans to recruit 20,000 more police officers and empower them to use fair and intelligence-led stop and search to prevent more young people falling victim to knife crime. I'm all for self-defense, personally. I mean, especially if you're a female, don't use a weapon that requires strength and use something more like a gun. I'm not advocating you to break the law in the UK, but of course, in America, if you want to say 98% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones, and again, if we get into the rape statistic, where it's, what was it, just under 50%, about 44%, maybe 42% of women who are targeted by a man who tries to rape them, if they're not carrying a weapon, then it's 42% that the men are successful, whereas if they are carrying a weapon, it's 0.09%, I believe. It's almost a 500 times difference. It's ridiculous. So yes, of course, guns help. And well, they stop between 500,000, 3 million offences each year, whereas how many knives do the guns take? 10,000, or add on another 20,000 if you want to include suicide. Yeah. And maybe you think then it's the politicians that are failing because they're not listening to the people, and therefore the people feel like they have to go and make a change themselves. Normally people just commit suicide, but hey, when it's that bad, they think, no, I've got to make a statement before I go out because you're not fucking listening. And if you're not listening to my words, then you will listen to my actions. And therefore they shoot people up. I can understand that completely. I find it abhorrent and would encourage people to steer away from that. I mean, video games are a great catharsis, so do that if you want, but otherwise find some sort of meaning in your life. Find something that you are valued in. What have you got? What gifts have you got that the world needs? That's all you need to know. Just find that out, as Jim Carrey says. And that'll definitely help you a great deal. You need a purpose, find one, make one, read, learn, study, and you will get there. It'll be a long and arduous journey, but you will get there. Keep sticking at it, even if you've been doing something for 3 months and only a few dozen people are watching you. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Do share around. Could do with the support, and I will see you next time. Have a good day.